It is not often that you have a spit take moment when you're watching the news, when you see something or hear something on the news that literally makes you want to immediately discharge whatever it is that you are consuming at that moment. But you would be forgiven if you would have that particular reaction yesterday morning when Secretary of State John Kerry said this on CBS about Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. Watch.
Well, it's an incredible act of aggression. It is really a stunning, willful choice by President Putin to invade another country. You just don't, in the 21st century, behave in 19th century fashion by invading another country on completely trumped-up pretext.
You just don't, in the 21st century, invade another country on completely trumped-up pretext. Okay, agreed. Also, it's really, really awkward to hear you say that.
You just don't, in the 21st century, behave in 19th century fashion by invading another country on completely trumped-up pretext.
Absolutely true, and something on which the United States has absolutely no leg to stand on after we did exactly that same thing, famously and on a much larger scale. Russia has, in fact, invaded a part of Ukraine on the completely trumped-up false pretext that there's some threat to Russian speakers there and Russia's only protecting them. It's total bullpucky. It's total pretext. But there is this central awkwardness about the United States government trying to lead a response of international outrage to that kind of violation when we're only a couple of years out now from our own near decade of war in Iraq, which is a war that was, of course, also launched on a trumped-up false pretext. And every international crisis feels like the biggest international crisis. But every one that we have had in the past few years, whether it is Syria or Libya or Egypt or Iran or Ukraine now, or even just the budget decisions we have to make now about what size we want the U.S. military to be and what we want it to be designed to do. Every crisis we face internationally, every big national security decision we make, all of these decisions are made, and all of these crises are confronted in the shadow of the last 10 years. We are a country that is really quite desperately weary of war after simultaneously fighting two of the longest protracted land wars and foreign occupations in American history. And we are newly and legitimately wary of what gets us into wars in the first place. And we come by that wariness honestly. That wariness is earned. We earned it the hard way under the last presidency. Last year, we teamed up with NBC News investigative reporter Michael Isikoff and David Korn from Mother Jones to produce a documentary called Hubris, Selling the Iraq War. It was the most watched documentary on MSNBC in the last decade. That documentary was based on Isikoff and Korn's reporting, and it told the story of how the Bush administration sold a war to the American people based on a pretext, based on evidence that in many cases was known inside the government to be false. That documentary, Hubris, answered the question of how that war was sold to the American people. But there remains the question of why. What was behind that public case for war? If what they were telling us about why we needed to go to war was false, well, why did they really think we needed to go to war? If the case made to the public was a false case, what was the true case? Why did we really do it? For much of the last year, we've been working really hard on trying to answer that question. And this week, this Thursday night, we are going to present what we have found. Thursday night at 9 o'clock Eastern, we're going to premiere a brand new MSNBC documentary called Why We Did It. It's the result of months' worth of reporting, as well as interviews with a number of people directly involved in the war effort. Here's a little piece of it. At the Pentagon, with just 2 months until the invasion, attention turns to who will run Iraq in the immediate days and weeks after the fall of Saddam. Retired Army Lieutenant General Jay Garner, a man with deep experience in the region, gets the call from Donald Rumsfeld.
He said, what we need right now is somebody to come in, put a staff together, and operationalize the plans we put together. You know, you'd think if you're going to put that together, you'd have office space and desks and computers and telephones and all that. I didn't even have a chair.
Inside the Pentagon, with just weeks to go until the invasion, planning for how to actually stabilize Iraq, that planning had taken a backseat to something else entirely, something we're only now learning about a little more than a decade later. We can now not only explain what that was really going on, we can show it to you. The reporting and researching for this documentary is one of the more disturbing things I have ever worked on since I have been here at MSNBC. Honestly, I think this is going to be upsetting to a lot of people when we air this documentary, but I also think that we have documented and found out some things that are really important. And as the U.S. government considers our options and makes our case to the world in the middle of another international crisis right now, I feel a real sense of urgency that we've got to get this out there now for the sake of clarity, for the sake of finally being honest for the first time about what really happened. Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, that's the plan. I hope you will watch it, and we will be right back.